Hello, my name is Ellie, and I'm your host for the next hour here at KGRA Digital Radio. Welcome to Human Ascension with Ellie, where we are examining the concept of humanity and what it means when people say that we will one day ascend into a higher realm of consciousness. Us humans have been talking about things like the age of Aquarius for a long time. But according to the planetary lineup being observed by astrologers all over the world and of every persuasion, that predicted age of Aquarius is actually almost here. We are in transition right now as I'm talking to you from the age of Pisces, which is all about religion, faith, sacrifice, and basically everything that we believe about life and our existence. It's now time to get to know our new surroundings as we transition outside of the age of Pisces and begin to anchor ourselves firmly into this shiny new age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius kind of leaves behind the concept of things like belief and faith and begins to refocus humanity on things like innovation, collaboration, science, and a deeper contemplation than anything that could be preached to us by another person. The friction that we've been feeling the past few years is the fact that we're in both as we transition from one to the other. So, today's episode is going to be a bit of a mind bender. Here's a hint, or maybe we should call it a quiz that I'm going to see if we can answer before the end of the show. So here's a question. You ready? All right. What do a heart transplant, a mystical Judaic scripture, a jury verdict, and a deck of tarot cards all have in common? What is the single thing that connects them all together? And how can we demonstrate that they are all clues of a big, huge mistake that humans might possibly have made right from the beginning of their existence that could ultimately explain why the world is so messed up right now? Told you it was going to be a mind bender. If you love a good rabbit hole, I hope you enjoyed traveling down this rabbit hole with me today. Let's see, shall we? So the other day, I was watching a show on Netflix. I think it was a 10 episode series from 2019 called Chambers. It was about a young Native American girl who was an orphan living quite a simple life with her uncle in a very rural area of Arizona. They were quite poor, but good, honest people, pretty normal and solid people. I like to call people like that bricks and mortar, solid as houses. Anyway, it turns out that this young girl had a faulty heart, and one day it just stopped. Even though she was poor, she managed to get a heart transplant, and her new heart came from a rich white girl who had unexpectedly died. The reason why this poor Native American girl got the heart is because nobody else wanted it, because the donor had died from electrocution, and an electrocuted heart is very likely to also be faulty. However, the uncle of the girl, who was in desperate need of a new heart, had no option, and so he was forced to take a risk on this unwanted heart. And so she got the rich girl's heart. Anywho, the series Chambers is a horror movie rated kind of series. It gets a little gory and it includes a bit of supernatural ghostly stuff. I really enjoyed it, which is unusual for me because I tend to run away screaming whenever it comes to horror movies. But for some reason, I like this show. But then again, I think I got interested when I realized that there was a real life message in the show that I wanted to understand. So, in the show, the girl with the new heart started remembering things that weren't relevant to her life after the surgery. She remembered a previous boyfriend that she'd never met before. She remembered family outings with parents that she'd never met before. She even began reliving the circumstances of how the heart donor had died. And so I did a little research online, and it turns out that this is actually a real thing. It's very common for organ transplant recipients to get memories from the organ donor's life. And this happens most frequently when the organ that's being donated is the heart. So let's talk about the science side of this for a moment. The official term to describe this phenomenon is cellular memory transfer, and it has been proven. So, cellular memory transfer is a fascinating and controversial concept in the science community, but it has enough merit to have caught the attention of quite a few highly credible scientists. Cellular memory transfer occurs when an individual who's received an organ transplant reports experiencing changes in their personality, their preferences, and their memories after the surgery. They might begin responding to relationships differently. Their taste in food might change, and they might start remembering experiences that they've never had. But their donor has lived those experiences. And that's why the idea is that the memories are stored inside the donor's organ. When the organ is transplanted, the memories are also transplanted. We all grow up believing that we are special and unique, even in the case of twins or triplets or even sextuplets or whatever. We're born and we spend our lives living a unique life full of experiences that add to our uniqueness. Every life experience is like a fork in the road, and every decision we make during our lives with our free will means that we branch out further and further away from being the same as someone else. Anyway, that's what we live our lives believing, and that's what our parents, our guardians, and our teachers tell us. So, with that in mind, let's imagine a scenario in which you've had a heart transplant. Okay, imagine that you are a 45-year-old married man with children. You adore your family, you're devoted to your wife and your kids, and you're also a Christian. You attend church every Sunday. Your belief in God and spirituality is strong, and you feel as though you're living the best that you can and that you are a good, solid person who cares for his community. You've got strong values and you work hard to provide for your family. You are very much your own person. You know what you like and what you dislike, and you're comfortable in your own skin. And your brother is nearly the same age as you, and you and he have been best friends ever since you were, well, born. You also really, really, really hate vegetables, and you have felt that way for your entire life. In fact, your favorite food is pizza, and preferably the extra, extra cheesy kind. In fact, you've lived on junk food for most of your life, and you drink a lot of sugary soda or beer or whatever. But you know what you like, and that's the life that you've chosen. So now you're 45 years old, and it's been one too many slices of extra cheesy pizza. Don't get me wrong, I love my pizza and I've definitely had my share, okay? But we're living a fantasy life of fly by the seat of your pants fast food paradise here, okay? And suddenly we've reached the end of the road, a heart attack. And that heart attack reveals a very serious and chronic heart issue that will kill you prematurely if you don't get a new heart in the next 48 hours. Now, if it was just about you, then you could decide to pick and choose your options. But you have a family that relies on you, and they would miss you if you were gone. And so your options are only really one option. You have to do what you have to do in order to survive. Fortunately, you have money or great insurance or a lucky moment, and you get a new heart. The only problem is it comes from a 28-year-old vegan yoga instructor who was unexpectedly hit by a car on her way to her usual Saturday afternoon atheist, lesbian, activist retreat. I know I'm being really cheeky, but just bear with me. We're telling a story here, okay? So, in a way, it's kind of wonderful. The heart donor took terrific care of her health, and the heart that you're getting is one of the healthiest hearts imaginable. But after the surgery, when you start to feel well enough to continue with your life, in the way that you've always done, you begin to feel some pretty strange stuff. For example, every time you walk past a McDonald's, the smell of the deep fryers makes you feel ill. Just looking at a slice of pizza, even your favorite extra cheesy pizza, makes you feel really nauseous also. and you're really, really looking forward to spring, and you're getting some really weird urges to shop for vegetable seedlings at the garden centre because you want to begin growing your own vegetables and preserving them and looking up exciting new vegan recipes on the internet. Your favorite food now is no longer pizza. It's carrot sticks dipped in homemade low-fat eggplant dip, accompanied by a fresh brewed bottle of kiwi fruit kombucha. Yummy. But that's not all. You also see your wife differently than you did before. You used to be a perfect match, but now it doesn't matter what she does. It just doesn't feel right to you. She doesn't feel right to you. And that familiar love that you once felt for each other is getting really weird and uncomfortable. But even weirder, for some reason that's inexplicable, you are beginning to really hate your brother's guts. You don't know why. He used to be your best friend, but now everything he says really, really kind of pisses you off, to be fair. And your love of sports has been replaced by a love of books or sewing or drama or, whatever. It's like you aren't sure who you are anymore. So, if all of this happened to you and this is how you feel now, who exactly are you? Are you the person that you were before the heart transplant? Or are you the person you became after the heart transplant? And how could a single organ in your body make such a big difference to your sense of who you are? The thing about memory transference is that it appears to also transplant historical experiences that help to shape the unique identity of the person who donated the organ. And once the organ has been transplanted, those historical experiences now belong to the transplant recipient. And those experiences shape who you are moving forward. So then, here's another question. If you were the pizza loving sports guy who adored his wife and worked hard to be a good, solid, God fearing Christian, but then halfway through your life, you found yourself bored with sports, skeptical about your wife, and fundamentally opposed to your church, what's going to happen to you when you die? Will you still go to heaven or wherever it is that you think, you're going to spend your afterlife, where the good people go? And that's the reason why you've been the way that you've been your whole life. Or are you going to hell for no fault of your own? Or is there no such thing? Is it possible that your afterlife could be entirely different because the heart inside you once belonged to an atheist? And would the answer to that question be different if the new heart that you got was once the heart of a saint? Or maybe even someone entirely different yet again? So there are a couple of very interesting cases of people who've experienced this phenomenon. But the most extraordinary case I've discovered involves an 8-year-old girl from a small town in Wisconsin. This little girl suffered from a severe heart condition. She was on the heart donor waiting list pretty much her entire life. And then one day, she and her family got some wonderful news. She was a match to a heart belonging to a 10-year-old girl who had just unexpectedly died. Now, no details about the girl's death were provided to the family, except that her death had been unexpected and that her body, including her heart, had otherwise been perfectly healthy. The surgery took place and all went well. But shortly after the procedure, the young recipient began to have strange and disturbing dreams about a man. In her dreams, that man would be standing at the foot of her bed. She didn't know who the man was, but she would wake up screaming and terrified by these dreams. They just kept happening and happening and happening, and the dream was always the same. He was a menacing, evil man, and she could sense it. And he said things to her that terrified her. And every night he just kept coming back and would appear at the foot of her bed again. And this went on for nearly a year. The girl was really becoming quite traumatized. So the little girl told her parents what she was seeing in her dreams. She was very disturbed by these dreams, and naturally the girl's parents were very concerned. They thought that perhaps their daughter might be suffering from a kind of post-surgery traumatic stress disorder. So they took her to a child psychologist for examination and treatment. The psychologist spent quite a few hours meeting with the little girl. He gained her trust and gradually got to know the details of her dream. The more he discovered, the more he found out, the more perplexed he became. He ended up speaking to the little girl's parents and told them that their daughter did not appear to be seeing this man in a dream. The way that she was describing him and the things that she seemed to know about him were quite typical of memory information rather than dream information. In some way, this man was real to the little girl, and she was recounting an experience that she had actually previously had with him in the past. But there's more. The psychologist knew about some of the studies taking place with regards to cellular memory transfer and the possibility that the little girl might be remembering things that were memories of the donor. And so the psychologist did some research and discovered that at around about the time of the little girl's heart transplant surgery, another little girl had been murdered after being taken from her bed as she was sleeping in the middle of the night. The killer had never been found. Now, the psychologist shared his findings with the little girl's parents. He suggested that they notify the police about their daughter's memories, and he said that he would be happy to assist them by also making himself available to discuss his expert observations about the little girl with the police. And so they did. The police took the report by the girl's parents and the psychologist quite seriously. They arranged for a photo fit of the man in the little girl's dreams to be done. The girl sat down with a police sketch artist and described the man in as much detail as she could remember. And when a picture emerged that looked like the man in her dreams, the police compared the picture to suspects that they had recently been investigating with regards to a little girl that had matched the description of the one being described by the psychologist. So the psychologist had done that research. And they discovered that this little girl that had been found murdered at around about the time of the heart transplant had also been a heart donor. So very quickly, they found a close physical match when it came to some of the suspects and people of interest that they had been questioning previously. And some of those leads really had gone nowhere. There was one particular fellow that had gone nowhere, but that had a vibe. And now this picture looked just like him. And so they brought him in for questioning again. During the interviews with the psychologist and the police, the little girl had given quite explicit details about things that the man in her dream had said to her in those dreams. He used certain phrases that he kept repeating over and over again. And during questioning, the police had actually noticed that this man that they were interviewing, that they had kind of brought on as a person of interest again, began speaking the same type of, he had the same method of speaking, and he was using very similar phrases as what the girl had described about the man in her dreams. So the police became quite brazen, and they ended up saying to the man that they had a witness who could put him at the scene of the crime at the time that this little girl had been murdered. And ultimately, they put him under enough pressure where he confessed to the crime. He went to court, was sentenced, was convicted, and was put in prison. So he had been found and convicted, all based on the dreams of the other little girl, who was now the owner of the heart of the one who had been murdered. So, wow, this is a really interesting story, right? But is it true? Well, actually, it is true. I discovered this story when I found a book written by a fellow by the name of Paul Pearsall. Well, actually, his name is Dr. Paul Pearsall. Dr. Pearsall died in 2007, but he was a licensed clinical neuropsychologist and clinical professor at the University of Hawaii. He was also on the board of directors of the Hawaii State Consortium for Integrative Healthcare. Dr. Pearsall was also, and this is pretty key, he was also a member of the heart transplant study team at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. The book that Paul Pearsall wrote is called The Heart's Code: Tapping the Wisdom and Power of Our Heart Energy. The foreword is written by two other scientists. Their names are Gary E. Schwartz and Linda Gale Russick. Gary Schwartz is an American psychologist, an author, and parapsychologist. He's also a professor at the University of Arizona and director of its Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health. Linda Russick is a psychologist and scientific researcher in Tucson, Arizona, and she is the author of 35 different research studies into memory-related sciences. Linda Russick has been cited in the scientific studies by other people more than 700 times. So, both Gary Schwartz and Linda Russick are highly regarded and credible scientific researchers in the field of human consciousness. Paul Pearsall's Heart Codes book is a blend of ancient wisdoms, modern medicine, scientific research, and personal experiences that demonstrate that the human heart, not the brain, holds the secrets that link mind, body, and spirit. The book claims to be able to prove that studying the heart as the primary organ responsible for human consciousness instead of the brain will help to unlock many of the mysteries of reality and consciousness and will help humanity to learn how to live longer, more productive, healthier, and happier lives. It should also be noted that other scientists from around the world have taken the principles of Dr. Paul Pearsall's book very seriously. The story of the 8-year-old girl who helped to solve her donor's murder is also not a fable. It's not a myth and it's not fake. It's real. And although the people involved have remained anonymous, primarily to protect the little girl's identity, their existence and the circumstances of the events surrounding the story have been confirmed by other scientific researchers, in particular, specialists in the field of neuroscience and human development. There have also been recent scientific developments in this field of cellular memory transfer. In 2018, researchers carried out a successful experiment involving genetic code injections that transferred memories between two living organisms. So, the way that it worked was that the genetic code from one organism that had previously experienced something measurable was injected into a different organism that had never had that experience. And after the injection, the recipient organism began responding as though it could anticipate the experience, just like the way it would if it had experienced it before. This cellular memory transfer stuff is a really exciting area of study, and it blurs the boundaries of science, mystery, and the human experience. But it also raises new questions about things like, where is our consciousness stored in our body? Is it stored in the brain or is it stored in the heart? So let's illustrate this in a different way. Let's move out of science and talk about one of humanity's most treasured institutions, the judiciary. And that is the legal system and the manner in which humanity gets justice when things go wrong. I'm pretty sure that you've heard the story of someone getting a gut feeling, something that was like an intuitive sense of something. Maybe they met someone who seemed perfectly honest and reliable, and they said perfectly reasonable things. But later, when they were talking about that discussion or describing it in some way, they admit to themselves that they felt in their heart that the person had been lying. So let's link that feeling we get in our heart, to the justice system. People who are called into jury service sometimes reach verdicts on the very premise of what they feel in their heart. They're not supposed to. Juries are given a strict mandate by the judge to only reach a verdict based on the physical evidence presented by the lawyers for both sides of the case. But as we know, being a lawyer and representing a legal argument is not necessarily about what really happened. It's about strategy and the physical evidence and presenting a good case, presenting a better case than the other side. I remember in my own life what a lawyer once said to me. He said, "It doesn't matter whether something was said or done. It only matters that it was documented and can be proven." If it doesn't appear in writing and if it wasn't videotaped, then according to the court, it didn't happen. Because the only thing that's real in the legal or the justice system is that thing that can be proven. And that thing may not be the core truth of what actually occurred. So, okay, if a court case can be won on proof that isn't really the truth of what happened, what does it mean when a member of the jury gets a feeling in their heart that doesn't fit the evidence? Is the jury member being unreasonable to follow their heart and reach a verdict, which is based on that feeling in their heart? Or is the legal system unreasonably flawed because it doesn't take the jury's heart into account? And the only reason why I'm asking this is because I'm sure you know as well as I do that we have a lot of innocent men and women rotting in prison right now for things that they've never done because the legal system let them down. And we have a lot of guilty people running around free in this world because the justice system let us down. If the human experience resides in our heart and not in our mind, then that explains a lot about some of the things that have gone wrong in this world. Maybe we are doing things the wrong way, and maybe we're thinking too much and feeling too little. And it's funny how technology keeps advancing to try and prevent us from feeling. And instead, it makes us think. Maybe if we focused on how we felt about things and spent less time being so logical about everything, the world would make a lot more sense than it does now. So, we've talked about the science of the heart and the fact that it might be more important than the brain when it comes to what's real and how we feel and the things that we remember. And we've looked at it from the perspective of an example that is relevant to all of us, the way the legal system works and the way that justice is determined. So now let's switch gears completely and look at it from a spiritual perspective. I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm a bit of an expert in reading tarot cards. I've been doing it for more than 3 decades. I'm at the tail end of writing a book about it, and I also offer tutorials on how to read tarot proficiently. I don't consider myself to be psychic or anything like that, but I do have a pretty strong and well practiced intuitive sense. I guess you could say it's a little bit like how a seasoned police detective would describe it. I just get a sense in my gut of what is, and generally, when I get that feeling, it turns out to be pretty accurate. I'm also quite well educated. I spent decades working as an analyst, so I guess you could say that I'm an analytical person. One role I've had in my career involved studying police officers and how they think, how they feel, their motives and their morale, and the emotional aspects of their job. So I've seen what it's like to get a gut feeling from the police officer perspective too. It's very similar to how a psychic just seems to know stuff. The only difference is that the police officer gut feeling version doesn't come with energy crystals or incense or the archangel Gabriel or the spirit of a celebrity who recently died. Instead, the cop just looks at the body of evidence in front of them and they somehow know where to look next or what might have happened and where to investigate. They just know it in their heart. They might call it their gut, but it's kind of the same place. And so, after all these years of reading tarot cards and after the career that I've had, in which I've had to work with some pretty serious people, I would say that the feeling I get when I get a feeling in my heart is much closer to the police officer gut feeling than something like spirit guides or psychic phenomenon. And when I read tarot cards, I really just shuffle until I feel as though I've shuffled enough. And then I lay the cards down into one of the layouts that I've been using for decades. And I read the messages that I see in the cards, which are not psychic messages. They're like a language. They're language messages, a bit like reading French or Spanish or something. I assume that the messages must be coming from somewhere spiritual, but I don't focus on that. What I do is I just read what I see. And yes, sometimes that can also be fine tuned with a feeling that I get in my heart. People who've been watching me do tarot readings on YouTube for a long time are probably getting close to knowing what I'm going to see in the cards before I've even told them, because they know that I use the same language to communicate with the cards every single day. There might be some very slight fluctuation in how the language is used, in the same way that the English language can have fluctuations as well. But generally, the language is steady and reliable and pretty accurate. I guess you could say that I get a similar degree of accuracy as a seasoned police detective would. Something like that. So, reading tarot cards the way that I read tarot cards is about getting a view of the aspects of the human experience that apply to a certain situation or a certain person, what they might be going through, and what is likely to occur down the line. It's not about predicting the future, because our decisions, our free will, is what determines the future. But what I can see is what seems to be happening in the energy of the moment. And the energy is made up of 5 components that sort of dictate the likelihood in some way. These components are called the elements. There are 5 different elements that are represented by the tarot card deck that I use. I've been using the same deck my entire life, and I know it pretty well. I use the Rider-Waite deck. It's the most commonly used tarot deck in the world, and quite recognizable to most people who've seen a tarot card of any kind. So when it comes to the elements or energies that impact the human experience, 4 of the elements are earthly and comprise of earth, water, fire, and air. The 5th element is the spirit. There are 78 cards, and my favorite layout when I'm doing a reading involves 10 cards. And so, just like a group of words can be positioned in different parts of a sentence to give the sentence a variety of different meanings, my tarot readings act in a very similar way. Now, I'm not much of a math whiz, so I actually asked the Bing AI bot to answer this for me. And I asked them to tell me how many life experiences I could possibly get from 78 tarot cards that were shuffled and laid out into a spread of 10 possible cards. It's best to ask the bot, unless you want to get some mashup from me. Anyway, the answer I got was 44,984,310 different human life experiences. And every answer that the tarot cards provides is a combination of the 5 elements represented in tarot. Water relates to emotions, earth relates to material concepts like money, health, and prosperity, air, which relates to the intellect and communication, and fire, which relates to desire, inspiration, and action. And of course, that 5th element, which is all about the spirit. A lot of people never consider the spirit to be an element in itself. And if it is indeed an element, like it's described in tarot, then the whole concept of being an element is that it is elemental or fundamental to life. Just as the earth and all of the minerals and physical substances, and the water with its life-giving properties, and our ability to think and communicate, and our energy from more, and our fire to act in ways that will deliver on our desires, are also fundamental to life. So is our spirit. And yet not many people think about their spirit. We don't teach spirit studies in school. We don't consider the spirit to be a factor when we're hiring new staff. And sure, the concept of spirit is discussed in churches and other religious places. And I'm referring, of course, to the Holy Spirit. But you see, it's not being discussed in a way that is physical and dispersed within the cells of our heart tissue. So let's think of the spirit as something that is physical and is dispersed through our heart tissue. Because the science that I talked about at the top of the show, relating to heart transplants and how they also transplant the donor's memories and feelings, appears to prove that the spirit is physical. It is physically inside the cells of our heart. And that's why we get that feeling in our heart when we just know stuff. So, if that's the case, does that mean that when we eat greasy fast food like a hamburger or extra cheesy pizza, the kind of food that clogs our arteries and is damaging our heart, does it mean it's also damaging our spirit? It's kind of a question that just, I ask. And let's take that even further. If our spirit is the Holy Spirit, does that mean that every greasy pizza slice that we have is potentially damaging God or the universe or whatever it is that we believe created us? I know it's a little bonkers, isn't it? I begin talking like this, and I'm sure that some of you are thinking, good grief, this woman has lost her marbles. But this is the whole thing about the science of something that seems unrelated, like cellular memory transfer. If the science is true, and it looks like it might be, it looks like there's actually something verifiable happening here, then it raises questions about the purpose of the heart, the source of the intuitive gut feelings that we get, and how it connects to the human spirit, and perhaps the wider question of the human soul. Now, I need to clarify here. The human spirit and the human soul are currently considered to be two different things. The spirit is considered to be a person's life force, the energy that animates them, gives them closeness to God and faith, and the spirit is eternal. It outlives the physical body. The human soul, however, is considered to be physically connected to the body. It rules our individuality, our emotions, our consciousness, and our personality. A bit like what would be affected by the cellular memory transfer. The soul is also eternal. It outlives the physical body as well. And in the Bible, Thessalonians 5:23, actually, it says that the soul, the spirit, and the body come together as three separate parts of our being. So, if the Bible is right, then the soul, which rules our consciousness, personality, and thereby our memories and experiences that have made us the person that we are now, that is the thing that moved from the donor to the recipient during the heart transplant, the soul. The heart is transplanted, and within it, the soul is transplanted. I told you it was going to be a mind bender. But here's a question. What if the Bible is wrong? Or what if it's being mistranslated? There is another divine scripture that I've been studying lately because, yes, I am that level of weird. I'm not a religious person, but I do find many of the ancient wisdoms to be really fascinating, I'm afraid, because of stuff like this. And so let me explain. There is a beautiful concept that is discussed in Kabbalah in a book called the Book of Zohar. Now, for those who aren't aware of the Kabbalah faith and the Book of Zohar, here's a teeny weeny, very imperfect summary. Kabbalah is considered by many to be an ancient mystical wisdom with close ties to Judaism. The Book of Zohar is a mystical text written in a similar way to the Christian Bible, but it reads more like the New Testament than the Old Testament. One of the things that the Book of Zohar does is that it offers an alternative translation to the Bible based on the literal translation of the original Aramaic text in which the Old Testament was written. What's relevant to our discussion today is that the Book of Zohar talks about the soul and the human spirit arising from the sentiment of the human heart. So, bingo, we're back to the human heart. Now, I wonder if you're going to find this as interesting as I do. If you do, then I'm afraid you're just as much of a weirdo as I am. But don't worry, weird is the new normal. I'm pretty sure of that. Okay? So, the Zohar states that it's wrong to consider that we each have our own individual soul and that there is in reality only one soul. It is impossible to fragment that single soul. It will always remain whole and complete. But we as humans can perceive that it is fragmented. But it's just our perception. Just like some people believe in aliens and some don't. Some people believe in God and some don't. The Book of Zohar says that at the time of our birth, we are physically divided from what it describes as the whole, which is just another way of describing completeness. So we are physically divided away from our completeness. and we're sent on a journey of life. Now, this journey of life is also depicted as the Fool's Journey in Tarot, for anyone who's interested. Now, the purpose of the journey of life is to find our completeness, to return to the whole. I guess you could also describe it as a journey to find our perfection or our fulfillment. Our job in life, from birth and throughout our life, is to return to our fulfillment, to return home. Throughout our lives, we're separated, not because our souls are separated. We are from a single soul, but we are separated by our separate desires and the desires that we have to complete ourselves and the perception that we have about what we need in order to experience that completeness. The Zohar, the book of Zohar, is an amazing book. This is where it's come from. So, this is where the concept of free will comes in. I'm going to talk about free will in a future episode. And actually, there's a question about whether free will really exists. But for now, let's just say that free will is our way of choosing how to match our desire for fulfillment against our perception of being incomplete. Our free will is the method that we have chosen so that we can return home. So the book of Zohar also says that each of us has a belief of what we think is our understanding of life, reality, and what really is, what really exists. But that as it happens, every single one of us is wrong. All of us. Regardless of what we think we know, we're all wrong. And the reason for that is written in the very first sentence of the Bible, if it's translated by the book of Zohar, because the book of Zohar has a different translation for that very first sentence in the Bible. Now, it's such a short sentence, okay? But check this out. So, according to the Bible, in the very first sentence of the Old Testament in the book of Genesis, it says, and I quote, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." See, I told you, a very short sentence, just comprising of 10 words. But those 10 words have defined the entire existence of man for a large percentage of humanity. And even if you don't believe a word of the Bible, well, the government, the justice system, democracy, diplomacy, education, everything, the manner in which most of the world operates is largely built from this very sentence. So we are all living in a world designed by and defined by an existence that boils down to these 10 words. And just to remind you, the words are, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So the book of Zohar has a slightly different translation of this very first sentence in the Bible. And it hasn't been plucked out of thin air, this different interpretation. The difference in translation was achieved because the ancient scholars who first translated the biblical scripture into the book of Zohar made a decision to take the literal Aramaic translation of the words as spoken during the time rather than the literal translation of the time to explain the Aramaic text. So it's kind of chicken and egg. It's like the Bible and the book of Zohar translators slightly disagreed on whether the chicken came first or the egg came first. And so the book of Zohar translates that very same sentence differently. And I quote, "In the beginning, that which shall never be named created God." Let me repeat that. In the beginning, that which shall never be named created God. That's the Zohar translation. A minor tweak in the translation of a very brief sentence. And suddenly, the entire concept of life, reality, religion, and everything we understand about everything is changed completely forever. So, what exactly are we referring to when we say that which shall never be named? And does that mean that God is actually the heavens and the earth? That God was created rather than being the creator? If that's the case, who or what is the creator? And is our fundamental misinterpretation and flawed translation of a simple first sentence, pretending to everything that we're supposed to understand. Well, is this the reason why we have ended up in such turmoil as humans? Because everything we know, everything we live is a follow up from that sentence, even if we choose to live without religion or faith, because our surroundings are defined by everything that followed that sentence. You know, to me, it feels a little bit like arriving in a strange country, getting dropped off at my hotel, and I've got, postcards that I want to send to family. So I've decided to go for a walk. I've filled out the postcards, put a stamp on, and I head off and I want to go to the nearest post office in this strange place that I've never been. But I don't know where the post office is. So I ask the first person I see, and they tell me to walk north. And so I walk north. But actually, the post office is to my south. But I don't know that. So I just keep walking north, hoping to find that bloody post office. And my feet are getting blisters and I'm exhausted, but I'm going in the wrong direction just because some guy who got his north and south mixed up gave me the wrong directions. That's what it feels like could be happening here with humanity. What if humanity has been going the wrong way because of a minor, well intended misdirection? And that's why we think the brain does what it does. And maybe it's actually the heart that does all of that. Maybe being smart and savvy and well educated and analytical and logical and evidence driven is all just taking us all in the wrong direction. What if we need to stop, just stop, and listen to our heart? And if the Zohar, the book of Zohar, is actually right, what the heart should be telling us is that we're not really unique with our own individual spirit or soul. We're simply divided and lost from birth. And our job is to find our way home to the collective. The book of Zohar says that there is no actual understanding, that all of us are wrong, that there is just a separation from the whole, from completeness, that occurs at birth and is followed by a lifelong desire to return to the whole and to our completeness, and that our arrival at our completeness is what is real. And so we spend our lives clinging to our desire because our desire for completeness paves our path home. Today's story about the heart is an example of how our traditional understanding of what is and what isn't has probably been flawed all along. The brain, in fact, might just be where we store things like memories of how to use a knife or a fork or a hairdryer, or how to cook a lasagna, or how to drive a car. But that the heart holds something deeper. It might just be that the heart is where we hold the perceived fragments of our soul, which aren't actually fragments. They are simply perceptions of fragments, and that no matter whose heart we have inside our chest, it is destined to return to the one and only soul which belongs to the Creator. That Creator that shall never be named. We can speculate, but we'll never know. Maybe that's what's happening here. All I know is that the fifth element, the one that I see and have learned about, and which speaks to me when I read the tarot cards, comes from a place that isn't in my mind. It isn't stored in my brain, but I can feel it, like when I feel in my heart that someone is lying or is being truthful to me. And for this reason, information like the weird little reinterpretations that I find in places like the Book of Zohar or other weird and wonderful ancient wisdoms, they're all very difficult to set aside. And I want to know more. And I'm kind of glad that I'm weird about that. Remember, the mantra is weird is the new normal. If you're still with me, well, welcome to Weirdo Club. It's a fun place to be, and I like it here. So that's it for today. For bonus content and a wide variety of tarot readings, discussion, and astrology, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel. It's called Ellie Dreams Down Under. There's a new video every day and sometimes two. And thanks to everyone who's joined me today on one of KGRA's broadcasting platforms. That includes X, Facebook, Rumble, and all of your favorite podcast forums. However, the best place to hang out and chat with like-minded watchers, experiences, spiritualists and weirdos. I've said weirdo a lot today, haven't I? But weirdos of the very best kind, like me, is at KJRA. Go to live.kjradb.com and enter promo code Ellie for 30% off your subscription. And that's all there is. It's been a pleasure. Until next time. Bye.